So let me come to my favorite equation. Because as you can imagine, we strategy folks, we sometimes have finance envy. Right? In finance, you have all these beautiful equations, and they're all so precise. And we in strategy, we only have frameworks and tools. So let me give you one equation. I will tell you that in order to get some sense of the size of your competitive advantage, it's actually quite helpful to know the following. What is the difference between the willingness to pay that customers have for your product minus your cost, minus what is the difference of the willingness to pay that customers have for your competitor's product minus their cost? So to give you some intuition of why this equation might actually work, let's do the following example. So let's say we have here one firm, and this is the willingness to pay that customers have for that firm's product. And down here is the cost that this firm incurs in producing this product. Now, this firm faces two competitors. One is a high-end competitor. So customers have a higher willingness to pay for that firm's product than for this firm. But of course, this firm also has a much higher cost of manufacturing. Now let's say there's a third competitor, so a low-end competitor. So that firm has much lower cost than this firm, maybe down here, but customers also have a much lower willingness to pay for that firm's product. Let's say here. To be a bit more concrete, I'm currently shopping for a car. So this might be the BMW. This is the Porsche. And that might be the Acura. I told you I'm from Germany, so a Japanese car, low willingness to pay. Sorry. As you remember, willingness to pay is really a psychological concept, right? Of course, the quality of the car enters it, but it's also the joy I have of driving the car and the joy I get of getting outside of my car, my driveway, and seeing my neighbor across the road. All of that, right, is sort of embedded in willingness to pay. Okay, so which car will I buy? Well, if you think about it for a moment, you'll say, Nikolai, that was a trick question, right? Because what else do you need to know? What do customers care about when they pick products? Well, as we talked about, right, it's the difference between willingness to pay and price. And I haven't told you the prices yet. So you can't actually tell which car I'm going to buy. Now, if I had said, look, my birthday is coming up, which car would I like see parked outside my house? Clearly the Porsche, right? That's the car for which I have the highest willingness to pay. It gives me the highest happiness. But the Porsche at $150,000, wait a second. Right now I have to recalculate. Okay, so you want to know prices. Let me tell you prices. Here's the price of the BMW, and here's the price of the Porsche. Which car will I buy? Well, now you'll say, well, that's fairly obvious, right? The Porsche gives me now more value than the BMW, so I would buy the Porsche. But will I really just simply go over to the Porsche dealer and hand over my money? No, right? I will go back to the BMW dealer and start to haggle, because I know the invoice price is down here. So what will I say? Well, I go to the BMW dealer and say, look, my uncle used to work for BMW. It's true. And I can't come home without a BMW. But you know that price over there at the Porsche dealer? It's pretty attractive. Is there something you can do for me? And what will the BMW salesperson say? He probably will say, well, let me talk to my manager, right? And he will vanish for 15 minutes in some back room. And then he will come back. And he will say, Nikolai, for you, and only for you. And of course, only today. If you sign right now, right here, I think I can work something out for you. I will probably lose my bonus for the month, but for you, right? Since your uncle used to work for BMW, I bring the price down to here. And what will I do? Yes, I'll walk over to the Porsche dealer. I'll go over to the Porsche dealer and say, beautiful car, right? I can already see myself driving down the road, but the price over there at the BMW dealer, very attractive. So I will go back and forth, right, between the Porsche dealer and the BMW dealer. So if this is a fierce competitive environment, what will happen? Right? I will go back and forth between BMW and Porsche until what happens? Until price hits cost for the Porsche dealer. And think about cost including cost of capital. So now the question is, what price does BMW have to offer me to make a sale? Well, it has to be a price such that I'm getting a little bit more value from the BMW dealer than the Porsche dealer can give me. Okay, so let's see how much value is this. So I need to take, right, that line down here. So let me take a different pen and just put this line down here, and this is all drawn to scale. Okay, so now we know at P star, right, I'm getting a little bit more value from the BMW than I can get from the Porsche dealer. And if I go back to the Porsche dealer and ask him, can you do something else for me? He says, no, Nikolai, really, I've done everything I can do for you. Okay, so now BMW has made a sale. That's nice. But of course, the question is, how much value is left for BMW? Well, if we look at this, we say what's left for BMW is this, right? P star minus cost. So now the question is, how large is P star minus cost? And so if we stare at this for a moment, we realize that P star minus cost, right, is this black line minus the green line. And the green line, of course, is the same size as this smaller black line, and that was exactly the equation that we talked about, right? The amount of value that BMW takes home is the difference between willingness to pay and cost for them minus willingness to pay and cost for the fiercest competitor. So what's the intuition here? The intuition here is that what customers care about is the value that they get. So if you want to get a customer, you have to give that customer a little bit more value than your competitor. In a fierce competitive environment, and if you are sort of in the B2B world, for instance, you probably live this every day, right? In a fierce competitive environment, what's the most value that your competitor can give to a customer? Well, it's all the value that they create. So now the question is, how much value is left for you? Well, it's all the value that you create minus all the value that you just gave away to the customer in order to make that sale. And so that's the amount that your competitor was creating. So this gives us some sense of the size of your competitive advantage. All right, so now the question is, if you look at this, why is Porsche still around? Well, I told you, right, these were my preferences. So hopefully there are some customers out there who have a higher willingness to pay for the Porsche, or maybe a lower willingness to pay for BMW than I have. And that is really what market segmentation is about. Right? What market segmentation is about is finding sets of customers who are similar in their willingness to pay. But of course, that also implies that when we start to talk about competitive advantage, it only makes sense to think about competitive advantage segment by segment. I don't think it makes so much sense to think about what's our overall competitive advantage, because different segments will differ in their willingness to pay they have for our product. Now, I sort of jokingly said, right, I'm from Germany, so my willingness to pay for the Acura is low. But as a matter of fact, in Germany there is no Acura. Why? Because Honda has not even tried to build up a luxury brand in Germany, because the Germans really say, it's a Japanese car, you can call it whatever you want to call it. It's actually quite interesting with cars of how much nationality enters sort of this willingness to pay function. Because, if you go to France, which cars do you see on the road? A lot of Renaults, a lot of Citroëns, lots of Peugeots, right? There are hardly any other countries around the world where you see a lot of these cars, but in France, everyone drives them because the French people really like the French cars. Likewise, in Italy, you see lots of Fiats, and in Germany, you only see BMWs, Mercedes, and Volkswagens. So nationality plays a big role in driving the willingness to pay. But it's actually another interesting story when we just talk about cars. I like cars. I'm German. When the German car manufacturers came to the US the first time, they failed miserably. And you remember why? German cars missed one key feature. They didn't have cup holders. Now imagine, right? You are a PhD scientist working in Munich at BMW, together with 150 other PhD scientists working on the best driver that you can give for a driver, on the best engine and the best performance. And your cars don't sell because what? Because they don't have a cup holder. You see, this is why understanding willingness to pay drivers is so important. Sometimes there are very small things that make a humongous difference in willingness to pay. So here we are, right? We are spending $1.5 billion devising the next newest wonderful engine. And really what our customers want is a 10-cent cup holder. Now, as you can imagine, right, this is quite to the frustration of engineers. But that's why we really have to understand our customers well. Because sometimes there are small things we can do that have a tremendously big impact on willingness to pay. and identifying those can be really a wonderful source of competitive advantage. So what are the implications of this formula? Well, basically what this formula says, right, is that in order to appropriate some value, you need to create more value, at least for a certain customer segment. Either by having higher willingness to pay or lower cost, or maybe even both. How are we going to do that? Of course, we have to do something different from our competitors. And that's how we can get back to what we talked about earlier. Really, what's fundamental about strategy is doing things differently. Because at the end of the day, what we need to achieve is a higher value creation for a particular customer segment that then will allow us to appropriate some of that value.